Hi, my name is Alex Zadetsky, and I'm a physical therapist at Rising Sun Physical Therapy. And today's little seminar is going to talk about recommendations in physical therapy for the quarantine. And it's going to talk a little bit more about what it means to do telehealth and why it's important, especially at these times. So let's get started. So the big thing that we're seeing now more than ever is obviously the emergence of the coronavirus and how that's impacting healthcare and specifically physical therapy. So, just because we are in quarantine and we're not able to go to physical therapy in person or go to the gyms because they're closed, we still need to put our own rehab in the forefront. And we can't forget that it's important to maintain mobility even through the process of such an event. Social distancing as well. Just because we're social distancing, we can still use our own homes to guide our rehab. There's different tools you can use. There's different things you can get for the home that are very easy to utilize. There's different equipments that are very convenient to use, and they can serve really good tools. There's a lot of musculoskeletal issues that can arise from sedentary positioning. So we want to make sure that we address those even in times when we can't go and physically see a physical therapist. So PT itself is evolving quite a bit. We are trying to incorporate a lot more telehealth, meaning sessions online where a physical therapist can assess you and treat you from the comfort of your own home. The biggest thing that we're trying to promote is education. So being able to explain the what and the why. What is going on and why is it happening? So we're able to do that by basically putting everything onto the patient. So providing a home exercise program and making sure you're doing things correctly. Now, even with telehealth, it's really important to utilize both means. So sometimes you have to have the therapy that's hands-on, and sometimes you need to blend both together. So there are going to be times that you may need to come in person if that's possible, and there's other times where you could do most of the stuff at home. A big thing also with telehealth is that since we're kind of looking into your home, we can also assess how you're sitting, your posture, your workspace, and how everything is set up, which we usually can't do if you're in person at the clinic. So that is very convenient. Also, if you're traveling, so if you're away from the area and you want to get seen by a physical therapist, you can go online, sign in, and the physical therapist can actually treat you from a far distance. So that's what kind of the telehealth system is based around. So a lot of people ask about the massage, right? So one of the biggest things that I hear from patients when you talk about telehealth is, well, what about my massage? What's going to happen with that? So, yeah, the massage is important, and people do like that. However, there are a lot of things that we can do to supplement it. It's not always necessary. So the big manual techniques that we use as physical therapists are stretching. So us stretching you. We do joint mobilizations. So if your shoulder, your hip, your knee is stiff, we can go in there hands on and loosen it up. IASTM just means that we use instruments to help break up tissue or help the tissue function properly. So a lot of times there's stainless steel tools that we can use to break down the adherences. And then also taping. So if you've seen athletes get taped for posture, for stability, we do that also. In relation to manual stretching, if we can't do it with our hands in the clinic, there are tools available, and we'll talk about this a little later, that can help you to stretch yourself basically. So you have rollers, you have handheld rollers, foam rollers, massage guns that you can use at home. And as far as taping, Rock Tape, the company, if you go on YouTube, you can get the tape yourself and watch the videos, and they're very simple if you have someone that can help you tape, or you can actually tape yourself. So there are ways around the manual therapy as well, even with telehealth. So some of the research on telehealth and on virtual therapy talks about stroke recovery, talks about musculoskeletal injuries, and there's one that talks about low back pain. Now, there's a lot more research out there. I just picked 3 kind of simple, quick studies, and we'll talk about each of them a little bit. So the first one is recovery after a stroke. So this study basically looked at a virtual reality system in terms of implementing it in the clinic or at home. So it's the same virtual reality system, but one is done in the clinic, one is done at home. And they looked at 30 patients with hemiparesis, so weakness on one side of the body, post-stroke. And they looked at the effectiveness, they looked at the experience that the patient had, and they looked at the cost. So what they found was, as far as effectiveness, it was equally effective based on the research that they conducted on outcomes. And they were able to measure that through things like the Berg Balance Scale and different gait assessments. So no matter if it was done in the clinic or at home, the results were very similar. And the subject experience, when you get questionnaires, the subjects can write down how they felt about the system. Was it easy to use? Were they satisfied with it? And they also found that it was very similar, no matter if it was at home or implemented in the clinic. And the cost actually for implementing in the clinic was more expensive than at home, which makes sense because you have people working with you, you have that cost associated with it versus at home when you're doing it by yourself. So this was just a small little study. Obviously, it's only 30 people, but it was able to show that we can implement things at home, relatively more complicated things, and provide similar effects than you would in the clinic. So it was an interesting study. As far as musculoskeletal disorders, we're looking at tendonitis, things like that, muscular pain, joint pain. There are 3 cases that were looked at. It was a lumbar patient, cervical patient, and an elbow patient. And they looked at what if you assess someone visually through the computer, virtually, or if you have to do a hands-on approach where you have to feel them, so palpation. And they use the McKenzie approach, which is a very specific way of assessing someone without having to touch them. So you're looking at 3 classification systems, and they classify the pain into derangement, dysfunction, and postural. And there's a category that's called the other. So you look at the patient move through the range of motion, and you can classify them in different ways, and that'll lead you to make a assessment, and then you can treat them based on that. Traditionally in the clinic, we also use palpation, right? So you are able to feel around, press different areas, and that'll help you drive your treatment. So in this case, they looked at both, and in the actual virtual McKenzie approach, where the therapist never really palpated them, they're able to assess them through the computer, they reported improvements in less than 4 visits. So really quick improvements in all these cases, and they were able to maintain those improvements for over 3 months. So this little, small study was able to demonstrate that just because you can't feel certain areas of the body, especially with musculoskeletal disorders, if you have a system in place, such as the McKenzie system, very specific system that they used, you can still, make changes to the pain and the function. So again, smaller study, but the results do show that the telehealth system does work pretty well. And now low back pain. So with this study, they were really looking at what happens after your discharge from traditional therapy. Now, low back pain, especially chronic low back pain, can continue for a longer period of time. And they're looking at what happens if you implement booster sessions, meaning sessions after you get discharged to help you continue rehabbing your back. So they looked at the 12 months after discharge to see if those booster sessions could help with pain. And these booster sessions in this study were actually done virtually, so telehealth booster sessions. And what they mean by that is it's mostly home exercise programs. So therapists being able to watch you do the exercise and make sure that you're doing it in a correct manner that's not going to hurt you. So when they were looking at these, they saw that 3 patients that were in the study met all their goals. So all their functional goals were met. Now the pain fluctuated, but ultimately they were able to meet their goals at the end of the study. Now, there are limitations to telehealth, and that's something that we're always aware of. The first one is technological issues. So can you get the system running? Are you able to maneuver around the system? Can you position your camera in the way that works for you? All those things that come with using the computer, basically. Connectivity. So if you have a session, there's obviously the Wi-Fi has to be strong. There's going to be lag, delay. Those are things that sometimes you can't avoid, and they're going to happen. And the hands-on approach is the big one that we talked about. Sometimes you need to have the therapist manually treat you. If there's a condition where you're stuck or you can't, push past a plateau and you need someone to go in there and mobilize your joint, do something that's a little bit more technical, then you may need to come in for a hands-on session. And that's okay. It's all about blending the two together, not just excluding one from the other. Another thing is the neurological assessment. So a lot of times you can screen someone through virtual therapy, right? If you're looking at their eye movements, their arm movements, leg movements, but you can't do things like a deep tendon reflex. So you can't check the reflexes, the sensory assessment, things that involve more of the neurological component. And the last one is strength testing. So a lot of times when we need to find out if you're strong, we do tests in the clinic where you resist the pressure that we place. Now, you can kind of overcome this by doing this at home to yourself, but again, it's going to be a little different. But the way around this is that we look at functional movements. So if I want to test your quads or your glutes, maybe I'll have you do a squat instead and make it more functional and see how you do that. And I'll use that as my strength assessment. So we have these limitations, but there's always kind of ways around them. Now, the big thing, now that everyone is living a lot more of a sedentary lifestyle, we can't really go out. The gyms are closed, the beaches are closed, you're stuck at home for the majority of the time. The 2 biggest things that we're looking at, we want to avoid is number 1, atrophy, which is the muscle getting weaker, shrinking, not being able to function as well. And number 2 is the tightness and the restrictions that come out of sitting for a long time or not being able to move around as much as you did before, right? So you go through a period of activity to a gradual shift in inactivity, and that can confuse the body. You're drastically changing everything, right? So how do we address these things? So I'd say the biggest 4 complaints so far that I've seen with how the quarantine has affected everyone in terms of rehab is the neck stiffness, headaches, back pain, and hip pain. Now, the big question is why, right? So obviously we're not moving as much, but a lot of people, prior to being quarantined had jobs in the office, right? Some people had jobs that required them to move around a lot. In any case, once we get away from that and we have to be confined to the home, we're most likely going to be sitting, right? So we're going to be sitting at the desk, and that desk is not going to be the same as your work desk, right? It may not elevate, it may not be able to be adjusted, and your chairs as well. So your whole work arrangement is going to change. Now, when that happens, we assume positions that are not beneficial to our muscles and our function. So obviously the picture here on the PowerPoint is exaggerated, but you see that the neck is getting severely compromised, right? Because we're leaning in, our necks are being compressed, our backs are rounded, and our entire body is kind of taking on this kind of fetal position pose. And that results in a lot of the musculoskeletal injuries that we were talking about. So, just a quick, look at kind of the two big areas that I would say you can start working on now, even without, going through telehealth or all the therapies, is looking at the front of the chest and the hips. So, two kind of big areas that we want to focus on. As we're sitting, what happens is that we tend to round our chest and our shoulders, which closes down the space in front of the chest. Now, that's important because if you look at the image, we have blood vessels, we have nerves, bundles of these things coming through that area. When you close down that area, you set yourself up to get numbness, tingling, a lot of symptoms down into the arms. Maybe not now, but down the road. So, a quick and easy way to do this is by laying down on a foam roller, right? So if you lay down on the foam roller with your hands out on the side, you're able to open that space up and counterbalance your posture that you've attained while you're sitting. So very easy foam roll stretch daily to kind of counterbalance that. Another thing is the hips. So when we're sitting, we're closing our hips, right? So our angle is getting smaller and smaller. Now, when that happens, the front of the hip becomes tighter and it puts more strain on our low back. So when we stand and we're ready to go for a walk or we're ready to go and do something functional, we need to stand. We're not able to do that as efficiently because our hips in the front are now tighter and the back is now being compromised. And that's where you get the back pain from. So we'll talk about some of the stretches you can do for the front of the hips as well. So, strength and endurance. Now, I just wanted to list a lot of these things out, but these are kind of the main things you can do to maintain your strength and your endurance without needing a lot of equipment. So, you don't need to have big gym machines to do any of these things. So, the things without equipment, so no equipment necessary, are push ups, planks, lunges, and squats. So, you have upper body, you have the core, and the lower body. Now, there are many varieties of each of these. I just listed them out just to have. If you're interested in, looking into the varieties of these things, we'll have Zoom sessions that we can talk about what kind of movements these include and how to do them correctly. That can be a whole separate topic. But push-ups, planks, lunges, and squats are kind of the fundamental exercises that you can do at home. Then we have TheraBands. So bands that you can either loop around or a long band that you can use that's stretchy and provides resistance. We can use that for the upper and lower body. So very easy. You could buy them in packs and use them pretty easily. Then we have resistance bands. Sometimes they are, handled. So you can use them to hold on to and do rows. You can do the triceps. You can do lat pull downs. So things that you would do at the gym, for example, like the lat machine where you're pulling down, you can do that with the bands. There's doorway attachments that you can use. So you stick it into the door and now you have a good stable base to work from. A Swiss ball or a yoga ball is one of those big, giant inflatable balls that you can find and pump it up. Not only is it good to sit on instead of a chair when you're working because it offers more core control, but you can do bridges on it. You can do shoulder exercises. There's so many varieties of things you can do with the Swiss ball. Again, there's a whole lesson that you can basically do with just the Swiss ball in terms of exercise. And then you have dumbbells and kettlebells, which some people have that offers some weight. And you can incorporate those with most of these activities. So this one is more for kind of a list of essentials for the home that I think a lot of people could benefit from. We talked about the TheraBands. So you have the loop TheraBands here that usually come in packs. They have different resistances based on color, and that's usually a pretty standard color set. So yellow and red are pretty light, and it goes to heavy as they get into the blues and the greens. And then you have the bands that come in a roll, which aren't looped, and they're just long, stretchy bands that are also useful. Um, they also have the handled ones, resistance bands that have handles, like we talked about for rows. On the left here, the balls, right? So these are massage balls. They're spiky. There's some that are really plain, but in either case, they're really important. For example, if you're having back pain, right? So upper back, mid back, you grab one of these balls and you can put them right on the muscles that line the spine, and you can put it right against the wall and massage yourself. So these are obviously areas that get stimulated and get tight when you're sitting for a long time. So if you have a ball like that, you just grab it, really quickly, put it on the wall and massage yourself. They even have the Swiss balls up here. So they come in different sizes. You just inflate them and you can use them, like I said, to sit on, or you can use them for a lot of the exercises. But having one of those is very, very important. Then you have rollers, which I think are a staple in anyone's home. I recommend at least having a full length roller that you can lay on. That will help you for the stretching of your pecs. You could also use them to roll out your legs. We'll have a separate roller class on Zoom as well, so you can play around with those and see how they work for you. But having at least one roller, no matter if it's low density, high density, is very beneficial. And then you have something that's a little bit more pricey. It's the Hypervolt, or there's different brands of these, but they're basically massage guns. So if you have this, you can actually go in kind of like what we do manually when we go in and kind of dig out some of the knots, or people call it massage, whatever you want to call it. It's a good way to do that to yourself. So it's quick, easy. The only bad side about it is it's more expensive. So they run 300 and up usually, but it's worthwhile to use. And the biggest thing is have fun with what you're doing. So we talked about some of these exercises. What we do in therapy and what you're going to be doing at home is you're going to build a foundation at the very bottom. So you're going to build your movement patterns, whether it be upper body, core, lower body, and then you're going to stack them up until you can incorporate everything and have a fun workout, right? So you can do some of these things with music. Right foot, two stumps. You can incorporate push-ups, planks, all of them into one movement pattern. And that'll be a good way to keep yourself at least maintained throughout the whole quarantine process. And even afterwards, you can use these after as well. So planks with movements, using your core, using your lower body. You can use upper body stability. And the biggest thing is, again, we're moving, right? So you're incorporating a lot of these things into one movement pattern. And that's our goal, is to break up our sedentary static position and allow our bodies to do what they naturally want to do, which is move. So with all these things that we kind of talked about, we glossed over some of the bigger topics, but we're going to go deeper into them as far as subsequent Zoom sessions, whether it be how to foam roll properly, lower body exercises, core exercises, upper body exercises. We could even talk about positioning everything inside the home as far as your workspace. Those are all topics that we can investigate further. Now, if you have any questions, you can reach us, email, look at our website. We have access to our email there, our social media, Rising Sun PT. You could always send us a message there. We have content on there that you can look at as far as exercise ideas. I would say start off by building up your home gym with some of these things, such as the roller, the TheraBands, things that are very crucial and essential and are going to last you for a very long time. So that's our quick presentation there. Hopefully, it helps you to kind of see the benefits of the telehealth, number one, and also gives you an idea of, well, this is what I want to do at home to make sure that I'm maintaining my function, whether rehabbing from something that I put a hold on because of the situation that occurred, right, with the whole quarantine, or if I don't have a condition that I'm working through, I'm trying to prevent myself from having a pathology later, right? So it's rehab and it's also the prehab component. So that's what this topic was about. And we'll have more sessions to come. And thank you for joining me. And we will continue. So here are the references if you guys ever want to look at the